You're watching Channel 27, the Brisbane channel.
Michael and
Michael? Glenn, yes.
Okay. Huh? Is Glenn coming to this meeting?
Glenn's not going to be coming to this meeting, and I think we start without Michael because he has a conflict for the first 15 minutes.
Okay.
Oh. And do we want the lights for the beginning of the meeting? Or should we do it in the dark?
Hi. Thank you. My co-president, or co-committee chair, mentor. Mentor, yes.
Or mentor.
Well, hello everyone, and
Accurate.
welcome to the July 15th meeting of the Open Space and Ecology Committee of Brisbane. And the meeting is called to order.
I move to adopt the agenda.
Do we have any, do we have a second?
I will second it.
Great, all in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes. So we have oral communications, and do we have any oral communications from committee members? Any?
Oral communications are for the public, so...
Okay, so moving onwards from the committee members, do we have any oral communications from members of the public?
Yes. Okay, so we did 3 and then 2?
No.
Okay.
Now we're at 3.
Okay. I thought I said public. Okay, I was confused. So Michelle has something, and then I have something as well.
Yes. I just want to invite everybody to come to San Bruno Mountain Watch Pancake Breakfast on August 9th and plant sale. It is at the Mission Day Nursery, which is just behind the firehouse. You take there'll be signs. And pancake breakfast from 9 to noon and plant sale from 9 to noon. So please come.
Okay.
Wonderful. Any other member?
Yes, I do have something. In August 12th through 13th, I think it is. Anyway, it's that Thursday, Friday. Is it down in San Luis Obispo is a conference on California climate action planning that I would like to attend. So this committee has sent other people to other conferences before with our funds, and I was wondering, I'm going regardless if I have to pay for it myself, but if the committee feels that it's a worthwhile thing to lighten my financial burden, I wouldn't mind.
So I guess I would put that out to staff in terms of what the proper protocol. Do we have a motion on, among the committee members, or do we discuss whether there's money available first, or?
Well, yeah, let's talk about whether there's money available. We've sent a couple of people to a conference last year. We have not a very robust budget, but a $500 budget that also includes staff. But this conference is $100, so if the committee feels so inclined, we can probably send 1 to 2 people a year to conferences, and if that seems like it's not enough, we could talk about it at the next budget cycle. But to some degree, your staff is supposed to be expert, or knowledgeable in the fields that we're discussing, and we're hoping that your perspective is the community perspective on issues that we deal with. So I don't know that we need to really make the budget a lot bigger at this point, but I think $100 is not a big burden on that budget.
And if you do go, would you be prepared to give us a report of the, kind of a synopsis and summary?
Absolutely, and I hope to become back even more brilliant than I am.
I can hardly imagine how that would be.
I make a motion that we...
Before you do that, Michelle, I think I can get the student ticket, so that's $30.
Well, I think that we should cover expenses up to $150. Maybe $200. I don't know. It just seems reasonable because there's gas. You're going to have lodging for one night,
I've got lodging for 3 nights, and that's where the money's going, because I've got a free train ticket. I can get a student ticket, but my accommodations are going to be around over $200. So
yeah. So,
unfortunately,
Karen, can we do $200?
So the question has come up before about the conference costs, so I don't know the answer about incidental costs, but I can check into that.
Well, whatever it is, if it's the $30 for my attendance, or if it's the $200 for my accommodations, or if it's $100 towards, I don't care. Just anything helps, because I already put in a lot of time volunteering, and as much as I love it, when it starts to, I start having to beg money off my husband, it gets a little...
Well, I move that we appropriate $200 towards Barbara attending this, and that she makes a report back to us, and if that's allowable.
So
Any seconds?
Do we have a second?
I abstain.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
It looks like the motion passed.
Okay.
So, ask her, can we have $200? Okay. Because I know it's going to cost her at least that to go for transportation, gasoline, everything else. And,
Like I said, I got a free train ticket.
Yeah.
So,
brought back a lot of great information over back to the group and back to the community. So I think it's well worth sending her as our representative.
Wonderful.
Yep. Thank you.
All right.
Besides, Natalie will be on her honeymoon, so she can't go.
Mm-hmm.
true.
All right. Well, great. I think I'm really looking forward to hearing your report. So
I hope so. I hope I am brilliant, like I said.
Karen, is this
sure
something that you would attend also?
It could be. I don't know if I'm available on those dates, though. What I read about it is that it alternates with the California Adaptation Forum, and I attended that last year. So it's going to be obviously new information and different, but...
Because if you can attend, you should attend as well. Do we need to vote on that, or do you
No,
just go?
no.
Okay. Just go.
wonderful. Okay, so I think next on the agenda we have a presentation from Ramona, or apologies in advance if I mess up your name, Arechiga? Arechiga. All right, wonderful.
So Ramona from San Mateo County Parks has offered to come and speak to us about their efforts and their plans in the Habitat Conservation Plan regarding vegetation management, and we saw this as an opportunity to get informed, to get you guys informed, and staff is going to, in the interest of collaboration, staff is going to also meet with Ramona and talk about what comes up at this meeting and the ways that we can work together to maintain properties that are of interest to both of us.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to your committee. And I'm speaking as the Natural Resource Manager for San Mateo County Parks Department, which is a new position. I've been on staff for about a year and a half and recently took over responsibilities for the San Bruno Mountain Habitat Conservation Plan. And I'm working very closely with our Technical Advisory Committee as well as interested scientists to refine and improve overall vegetation and habitat management activities, as well as refine opportunities for monitoring. So what I'm planning on speaking to you briefly about today is where we are and what we're hoping to do, and provide an opportunity for you guys to ask some questions. And I really look forward to maybe integrating management a little bit more closely with the City of Brisbane and our other partner cities, and hopefully stretching our precious funding dollars a little bit further here and there when we can find overlapping objectives. So in brief, you'll see behind you, or in front of you actually, a map of the entire Habitat Conservation Plan area, and that area is outlined in black. We've also provided an outline in blue of the City of Brisbane boundaries just for some perspective. I didn't include information about other ownerships at this point on this map because it gets really busy very fast, but that's just an overall perspective. And what I'm here to talk about is the emerging trends that we're seeing in habitat conversion and what we'll be focusing on for the next several years. At this point in time, and what has been outlined in both the 2008 Habitat Management Plan and the more recent 30-year assessment that should be available after an August HCP trustees meeting, we'll be posting that on our website, is that we're undergoing significant scrub conversion throughout the mountain in our grasslands and priority prairies. What this means is that we're losing grassland habitat which supports both the mission blue and the Calliope silver spot butterfly. Now, not all of the scrub conversion is occurring in high priority areas for those two species, but enough scrub conversion has occurred that we'd really like to tackle scrub as a major vegetation priority at this time. That includes native species, so we're going to be targeting primarily coyote brush, toyon, Indian plum, bitter cherry, and some other lovely native shrubs that are also invading our grassland. So I want to be very clear that it's not just the invasive species that we're targeting at this point. We're targeting our native coastal scrub vegetation.
So I have a question about that. So would conversion from grassland to scrub be considered natural succession? Or I guess how do we get to a point where we have grassland? Is it because that used to be area that was rangeland, and so the cows all ate it down, and then once the cows aren't grazing there, then the scrub is naturally going to reoccur?
Yeah, there's a number of reasons for conversions. Absolutely, grazing pressure is one reason for potential for type conversion in systems due to natural succession, as you've outlined. Yep. You also see a change in disturbance pattern. As San Bruno Mountains surrounding areas have become more and more urban, you see changes in natural disturbance patterns, and I'm specifically talking about fire.
That's what I was
The occurrence of fire has decreased on San Bruno Mountain significantly over the last, I would probably say most significantly over the last 30 years, and then gradually the previous 70 over time. So the lack of fire means that there's nothing resetting the system to keep it in grassland and or prairie. Those factors work in combination, the grazing and the lack of fire, and the lack of grazing and the lack of fire accelerates the process even more. And unfortunately, due to the urbanization around the mountain, prescribed fire is not really an option for management at this time.
You anticipated my next question.
The other thing to consider, which I think hadn't previously been discussed, was the fact that we're very close to San Francisco International Airport, and smoke is a major safety consideration, not only for the airport, but it's also an air quality issue. So prescribed burns are also going to be regulated under both that safety obligation with proximity to the San Francisco airport as well as air quality.
Well, the other reason it particularly impacts San Bruno Mountain is the nitrogen deposition from the airplane flyover and the amount of pollution in the area. And nitrogen deposition is particularly potent there because it combines with the fog and really lays down heavy and encourages the higher level plants to kind of grow out of control. It's like basically fertilizing them.
And I think more so than airplane nitrogen influences, it's actually car.
And car, too.
And that's primarily, and I didn't bring this map, I didn't anticipate that input, but we do have a map where most of our nitrogen deposition is actually occurring at the margins and not in the higher ridge tops due to that fog and wind influence that we get usually in the late afternoons on San Bruno. As I'm sure you are all residents, so you are quite familiar with the wind as it kicks up in the afternoon. So usually it's within the first 100 meters of the bottom of the mountain in close proximity to those high traffic corridors that you're seeing impacts of nitrogen deposition. And to be honest with you, well, anywho, we can go into that at another time. I can talk about these things for ages. Can I have the next map brought up? I want to talk about specifically the areas that we're looking at and hoping to eventually find some coordination opportunities for both the City of Brisbane as well as San Mateo County Parks with utilizing both of our efforts to treat encroaching scrub. Perfect. So I'm going to work from east to west. And this map provides you with an area that SR1 is our Southeast Ridge 01 plot that we've identified for scrub, and particularly fennel is an issue in this parcel. So we're looking at treating, well, let me talk about the map first. The red dots are for Calliope silver spot observations. The darker the dot, the more recent the observation. You'll also see a few lone mission blue dots on that, and those represent observations of mission blues on the most recent transects. And so we're looking at improving the quality. Now, Calliope use Viola pendiculata, which is also known as Johnny Jump Up, I believe. And so we're hoping to make sure that we clear areas of fennel, because fennel does change soil composition and chemical structure. So we're hoping to target not only scrub beginning to invade this area, but also fennel in this particular polygon. And you'll see towards the top of the polygon, as you get closer to, the ridge. I was just trying to make sure that that's what I'm seeing as I look at up top. You'll start to see that we're going to approach the trail that you find, the old Ridge Road and Dozer Trail that goes through the top. We're not going to quite make it all the way to the top this year, but we're going to probably look at expanding that in future years. But this year, we're hoping to target fennel and scrub here in this polygon.
I have a question more generally. It might relate to the previous map, but you can see it from this map as well, which is it looks like a lot of the observations kind of correlate to the subridges and the trails that run along the subridges. So should I infer that the observations are happening because that's where the people were to observe, or could we infer that there are actually these species in the areas where there are no dots? It's just that nobody walked up that particular ravine or on that particular slope.
I think I would caution you to make too many inferences about where significant populations are outside of the observations.
Yeah.
Not saying that they don't occur there, but often due to the stature of the plants and plant preferences and the way that they compete within the ecosystem, they tend to outcompete in very difficult sites ecologically. And they're very hard to find by a butterfly when they're competing against very tall annual grasses.
Right.
If you've walked the south slope of San Bruno Mountain, you know that the annual grasses, the avena and or wild oats, can sometimes get almost shoulder high. It's going to be very difficult for a butterfly to locate a lupin plant or a viola, because most of those are within the first foot of the soil. So for the case of lupin, they do get a little bit taller, but if you have a 4-foot site of grass and you have a 2-foot tall lupin, it's going to be very difficult to locate that. So there may be host plants scattered in certain areas that are not identified on the map. However, whether or not it's occupied habitat remains to be seen.
So in a sense, where the trails are is actually creating habitat for the butterfly, because the trail breaks that grass, and then you have some marginal area next to the trail where you might have those species have an opportunity to come up. Or
I would also caution, correlation is not causation.
Sure.
And just because the observations are correlated to trails does not mean that the trails are actually necessarily the reason that they're occurring in those spots.
Fair enough.
Ridge tops tend to have thinner soils and are more resource stressed. Thinner soils, less nutrients, and that usually is are two of the key primary components for some of these specialty species to outcompete non-natives.
Okay. Can I ask a question? I'm kind of curious to know why there aren't more observation points at the lupin and viola points. So you see all these points on the map, but we don't see any correlation between that and the observation of the butterflies using them. Is there a reason for that?
I would say primarily the age of the data.
Okay.
I've been on staff for about 1.5 years now, and most of our GIS data predates me by about 8 years. And that was the most recent mapping that was done on the mountain. So I'm working at this point to re-examine our mapping priorities and looking at ways to update all of our vegetation information.
Okay, then my second question is, when you have this polygon circled, that's an area you're going to be clearing brush. Kind of seems to make sense that you'd update your information before you put a whole bunch of man hours on it.
Right now, I understand the point, and I've walked most of these areas repeatedly. So the reason that let me take a step back. Our priority treatment areas are a result of an analysis that we had done that will be available in August, called the 30-year assessment. We hired Creekside Center for Earth Observation, shorthand Creekside Science, to take a look and help us prioritize treatment areas on the mountain. They designed a GIS analysis that overlaid historical locations, observations, as well as locations of host and nectar plants in order to come up, and they also looked at aerial images over the last, I think, 10 or 20 years to identify areas that fit the criteria for needing treatment for scrub. The areas that you see marked out as polygons in the maps that I'm showing you are about 100 acres of the 435 essential grassland acres that they identified in their analysis. There's essential, there's priority, and then there's marginal. And we're hoping to treat over the next several years the essential acres.
Okay, so you're picking that area because you think you can clear out the path and you'll see more of the lupin and viola points pop up then.
Correct. Okay. Any area that we are planning on treating this year moving forward, we're hoping that the goal would be not to leave these areas for the next several years. Historically, certain areas were treated annually and then stepped away from, or only some areas, and I can't speak about all of the historic practices because I haven't had the time to read the 30 years of annual reports. However, some areas haven't been treated on an annual basis, so there's been some backsliding. So the goal moving forward is to stay consistent with our approach, treat an area till we determine that it is meeting our objectives, which we're going to be using some photo monitoring as well as some other field-based quantitative techniques to make sure that we're meeting the objectives before we step away from the areas that we're treating this year moving forward. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm going to just I don't want to take up too much more time, so I'm just going to pop through the next couple slides, and please ask questions as they come up. So if we can pull up the next map. And if the staff has any questions, I'm happy to entertain them as well.
I have one question. Is there anything included in adding more of the lupin and the viola?
That's a wonderful question, and we're looking at working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to get an additional permit to do experimentation. So we're hoping to do seed increases of some of the plants. Specifically, viola is very difficult to propagate, and there haven't been many successful propagation techniques developed for viola. So in order to do that, we have to work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to get a special permit. And we're hoping to move forward with that effort over the next year so that we can work with Mission Blue Nursery specifically on that effort.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, that's
What's the man hours that, how many people does it take to clear 100 acres worth of plants?
I don't know if I can give you a raw estimate of man hours.
Well, I meant how many people?
Oftentimes it'll be a crew of anywhere between 2 to 4 people, usually with a set of hand tools and potentially backpack sprayers, depending on the species. And for brush, it's going to be a cut and paint method primarily, unless you're within close proximity to a host plant. And then it'll be all mechanical removal, hand removal.
Well, that's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. The challenge with San Bruno is the steepness and how spread out everything is. I don't have a four-wheel drive vehicle at this point, so it's very difficult for me to do my own work because I have to hike for at least an hour sometimes to access locations. So a contractor will be facing very similar conditions, except they will have a four-wheel drive vehicle.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So this area in particular, I think, is one that many Brisbane residents know. There's quite a few trails that kind of traverse in the Brisbane Acres. And so this area was prioritized because it does have the summer lupin, which is called Lupinus formosus, and it's an alternate host plant for Mission Blue, and it is usually depended upon in El Nino years. So one of the goals that I have for moving forward with habitat management is making sure that we protect existing Lupinus formosus populations and potentially expand them. So again, working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we're hoping to increase our ability to do experimentation for adding seeds and or other methods to increase populations of these important host plants. So that's part of the reason that we've identified BA01 as a treatment area. Does anybody have any other questions about this particular map?
Yeah, SR02.
SR02, we're looking at SR02. I'm not sure if that has made it onto the final cut for our priority treatment areas. Since it's not in Brisbane's area, I haven't prepared anything specifically to speak to on that, but it's an area where they, let me take that back. Let me take a step back. That area underwent some scrub removal last year, and Mission and San Bruno Mountain Watch did a planting, I think, in that area.
Okay.
So that's one of the areas, since it was recently treated last year, that's the reason it was prioritized for treatment this year.
Good.
And we're going to be meeting with San Bruno Mountain Watch to discuss their opportunities for restoration work and continued work with revegetation efforts of alternative nectar plants.
Okay.
And some silver lupin, I believe. Next map. Perfect. And thank you for bearing with me. Now, most of the area that I want to talk about is not within the purview of the city of Brisbane. However, I think many Brisbane residents use this area to recreate and hike and gain access to the ridgetop. I know I do. So I wanted to bring this up to share with you our efforts to treat Owl and Buckeye Canyon, as well as potentially some newly identified areas of Lupinus formosus that I've found in my wanderings. So we're looking at treating scrub throughout the polygons in Owl and Buckeye, and we're also hoping to work with San Bruno Mountain Watch to continue some of the restoration efforts and planting efforts in these areas. Owl and Buckeye Canyons are incredibly important areas for both Mission Blue and Calliope Silver Spot. And I think, you know, if you've ever walked there during butterfly season, you've probably seen some of our friends flitting around. So what's been really neat for me to see, and one of the reasons I'd like to do additional mapping of our populations of lupin, as well as other important plants on the mountain, are the increased numbers of Viola pedunculata that I've seen in OB01, right off of Trinity.
OB01.
So
I have a question about OB5 and OB6, just because they're a different shape than all the other polygons, and
Yeah.
kind of how those got selected, specifically OB5, because I can see OB6 has a lupine, inside its perimeter, but I was just curious about OB5 because it's kind of sitting there.
I completely understand. So we work collaboratively with our technical advisory committee. Joe Cannon, who is with San Bruno Mountain Watch, identified a lupin formosus population in OB5, and I think he said there was approximately 100 individuals or somewhere in that range, which is part of the reason that it was identified for scrub treatment. We probably won't spend a significant amount of time. It won't be restored, but any encroaching scrub on that lupin population will be treated if it's under 2 years old. would be the
OB6
goal.
also?
OB6 is one that I found when I was flagging for a fuel reduction project, and that we're hoping to also treat, but I do want to let, it's pretty close to residents on Kings Road,
Yep.
so I want to make sure that I talk to the residents that we'll probably be sending a small crew up to just push back on the brush.
Yeah, it looks like it's just up the hill from where we did the habitat conservation.
It is, in fact. And there's actually I marked a few plants leading down to the ravine that you folks worked in around April 25th.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the lot is for sale. It's right adjacent to that. It's
Right.
breaking my heart.
That lot I haven't seen anything in of interest. I've traversed it a few times, but up and to the, let's see, northwest, I did find one lone lupin right on the border of some, I believe, overstory toyon. But one lupin does not make a population, unfortunately.
That's actually the last slope that I found any evidence of rattlesnake on.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, but that was a long time ago,
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
20 years
it
ago.
would be really neat to see them.
I haven't seen
Oh,
one in,
my gosh, it would.
All
I don't
right.
think I've seen
So
one since the early 80s.
with that, my presentation, I don't want to overwhelm you. I just wanted to kind of give you a snapshot of what we're hoping to do in and around Brisbane. We do have some work areas targeted on the other side, closer to Guadalupe Canyon Parkway, but most of those are not, some of them are not under our jurisdiction. They're still privately held. So we're working and collaborating with the private landowners and contractors to identify and prioritize work. So with that, I'm happy to take any additional questions. You have my contact information. I'd be happy to come back and share more information at a later date.
I have a couple questions at the chair's leisure.
Yes, absolutely. Let's have Barbara.
Okay. Pesticides, herbicides, do you know what's going to be used and are there alternatives? I hate.
I understand. It's a concern that we hear quite often. To be honest with you, I would hate to lose that tool out of my vegetation management toolbox. There's no inexpensive way to do vegetation management, and there's increased costs without using herbicides. We don't broadcast spray. We target specific invasive plants, and we usually do a spot treatment, a light a light application on the host plant, on the plant target plant, or we do a cut and paint where we're just targeting the basal material of the cut stem. At this point, I am unaware, beyond natural disturbance, how to better control for these species. And
Okay.
Or which one do you use, or which?
it depends on the plant.
Okay.
And most of that information you can find in our annual reports, which are posted online.
I raised this concern at the TAC several years ago.
Yeah.
And I was assured that the specific herbicides that they use, which you have to have a training and permit to use,
Correct.
do not contain any of the succophants that have created such decimation with the
Pollinators, are you concerned about?
yeah, and also with the amphibians. So
Yeah.
So we're not broadcast spraying. We don't spray on windy days. We don't spray when it's raining, because all of those things affect not only the efficacy of the product, but also they create problems on the broader environment. So there's very strict rules regarding you can't spray when it's over, I believe, 5 or 7 miles per hour wind. Certain
That might be never.
it's very challenging.
It's a tough one.
It is.
they got
So-
there early morning and
So there's quite a few restrictions, as well as you have to have a certified applicator's license, you have to maintain a certain level of training and annual education in order to maintain that certification. And we do get prescriptions written, usually on an annual basis, for the appropriate method, so that we can make sure that we're staying on top of current literature.
Okay.
What is used is usually not active in the soil as well. So if you have specific questions, I'm happy to point you to the annual reports that have more details about the specific chemical used with the specific plant target, and then I can also provide you with the links to some of the environmental information regarding how active they are, how long they stay in the soil, their half-life, that kind of thing. So
Okay.
feel free to let me know or shoot me an email, and I'll get that.
Sure, it has to be asked.
Absolutely.
I have two more questions, or sort of one question and a thought. Occasionally we see little blue butterflies frittering down here in town, and I've heard conflicting reports about whether or not those are mission blue butterflies. And I was just wondering if you could answer us that authoritatively, once and for all.
There are a couple of different, I believe there's at least one species in my novice butterfly experience that I was like, oh, is that a mission blue? And I was out with Patrick Coburnis, who was the former habitat manager, and he's like, nope, that's a cabbage butterfly or some such other butterfly. I can get a list of other look-alikes if you'd like, but there are a couple of other grayish blue butterflies that aren't mission blues that do make appearances lower down.
Okay.
Like the Ackman blues.
There we go. That's
Very hard to distinguish. Usually, Liam said usually you can tell by how high they're flying.
and the pattern of
the
flight.
pattern of flight. And I don't have it mastered yet.
You know, I'm not sure if you're interested, and I can talk. There's usually an annual butterfly count on San Bruno Mountain with the North American Butterfly Association, and you would.
So there's definitely things other than mushing blues, flittering around town. So
Yeah, and if you hike in May and June, April, May, and June, you also see the swallowtail butterflies, which are incredible, and they use the Dutchman's pipe plant, which is also a pretty incredible-looking plant. So they are gorgeous and huge. They're hard to miss and hard to mistake, and I really enjoy seeing those.
And you can see the green hair streak, and people forget that we always talk about the 3 endangered one, but there are over 30 species that make their home on San Bruno Mountain, and many of them rare, not yet endangered.
and the other thing is if you're taking out a toy on, can I have it in my yard?
That's an interesting question, and I completely sympathize with the desire.
You're all going to tell me it's more work than it's worth. I know it. I can hear it.
Well, currently we don't allow plant collections generally in San Mateo County Parks facilities.
I just thought if it was going out anyway.
I understand. I wouldn't be opposed to some discussion potentially of salvage at some point. However, I suspect the size of the toyons that we'll be treating would be not easy to transplant, and they probably wouldn't survive. Secondarily, I'd be very concerned about disturbing that much soil and creating additional opportunities for invasion of
All right. I
non-natives.
However, you can come to the plant sale on August 9th and buy one from the Mission Blue Nursery.
My problem is I want to take out this 6-foot-tall pyracantha, and I don't want to replace it with a 6-inch tall toyon.
We have ones that are larger.
You have big ones? Okay, last time I was there, I only noticed big ones.
Well, they've grown since then.
Okay.
Was there a thought you wanted to finish on the butterfly count? Maybe the
Yeah, I think
public or the
it's
committees?
been rescheduled. I don't know what the new date
I
is.
think it happened on July 5th this year.
Oh, I think it did.
When it was rescheduled.
Yeah.
But if that's something of interest, I'm happy to share those emails with Karen that could maybe then push it out to the group
Yeah.
for next
That's
year.
it for me. Thank you.
So my question was, do you have an update of the status of Clippy Hill and when we'll be able to start working there, when it'll be turned over to the county, anything?
I don't, unfortunately. We're still waiting for some documents. And generally, historically, we don't accept property before it's undergone a full 5 years of treatment and then verified that it's up to dedication standards. So at this point, I don't know when that will occur.
Are you overseeing the treatment yourself? I mean,
It's been
HCP overseeing the treatment?
The private landowners have hired a private contractor to do the work, and before it's handed over, I'll be going over and verifying that it meets our standards. So I'll be doing monitoring to verify that it's meeting our standards. But at this point, I'm still waiting on documents and additional information.
Okay, if you could keep us updated on that, that would be really good. There's a lot of
Absolutely.
interest and a lot
Yeah,
of sacrifice that went into that.
I don't anticipate it will be, the earliest would be the end of this year is what I would anticipate, since it hasn't gone through the full 5 years of treatment.
Okay, and any updates on the properties from Foremost McKesson?
McKesson, I'm still waiting for additional restoration plans.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is very exciting.
It is really exciting. I have one question. I was just wondering, some more curiosity. Have you already chosen a contractor?
We have not. We are in discussions with 3 folks, and there is potential to kind of maybe test. One of them is San Bruno Mountain Watch, and they're going to be awarded restoration contracts. So one contractor we have selected and we will be working with again this year. The other 2 are, one has done historical work on the mountain, the other one is new. So we're considering kind of extending maybe a trial contract, a smaller portion of the work to the new contractor to see the quality of work and if it would be a good fit for the mountain as well as for our needs. And I believe the other one has worked on the Brisbane parcels historically as well. Yeah.
It's hard to find really qualified contractors. I mean, we're thinking about starting with San Bruno Mountain Watch, starting a program of training people to do this type of work.
Neat.
Because I was wondering,
So-
I mean, how many people understand this and have the
I
have
have-
the knowledge and the experience to
Certainly,
bring to
and
the
I
table?
And I would say, there's quite a few very well qualified companies, but it's whether or not you have the bandwidth to take on a 2,500 acre.
There is
project.
that too.
But we're only treating about 120 acres this year, if all goes well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, I just want to extend a huge thank you for letting me come and talk to you a little bit about our vision for San Bruno Mountain for the next year and hopefully several years. And feel free to use my contact information as you see fit. And I look forward to coming back and giving you an update on how we're doing. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ramona. We look forward to it.
Just one more question. Will you send us the link to the report when it's available?
I absolutely will. That's easy.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. And, as a plug, I have a new page dedicated just for San Bruno Mountain that has quite a few of the historical reports, as well as annual reports, the original HCP documents, and some of the amendment information. So if you have any questions about that, we're trying to make sure that we make that publicly available so that you don't have to always email someone, that you can find it yourself on our website. So
The San Mateo County Parks website?
San Mateo County Parks, if you go to Natural Resource Management, you can scroll through and there will be a section called San Bruno Mountain HCP. And if you click on that link, you'll get quite a few documents and some good information that you're all probably aware of anyway. So thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just as a follow-on, we're hoping to have Mark Heath from Shelter Builders next month give us an update on our vegetation management work in the acres, so that'll dovetail nicely.
Excellent.
Great.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really great.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
All right. So, Natalie, could you bring up the agenda on the screen again? I'm sorry. I'm having trouble getting it on my computer. Thank you very much. So, our next agenda item is the Environmental Action Plan update.
So in addition to the staff having some updates on this, I had a few points I wanted to go through from the previous meeting. How would you, staff chair, how would you like to organize this?
Oh, well, that was a large part of why we put this back on the agenda, is that you're on the subcommittee and weren't able to come to the last meeting. So
Yeah.
we wanted to go through, at the very least, go through the changes that we talked about at the last subcommittee meeting, and also talk through the suggestions, the feedback we got while you weren't here. We don't have a preference as to how we do that, so kind of
Okay,
had an idea.
if you don't have any preference, would you mind if I just jump into my notes, because my tablet keeps trying to time out
Yeah.
on me, and I can't figure out how to get it to download.
Shall Natalie put one particular document up on the screen? Are we talking about with reference to the outline, or?
This was actually notes I made regarding when I watched the previous meeting.
Okay.
So things that sort of
Like an outline.
I felt needed to be clarified, not necessarily pertaining to any particular part of this document. So, in the subcommittee, we talked pretty extensively about some of our ideas and motivations for certain ideas, and it was a little. I wasn't quite sure what happened, because I would have thought, even with my absence, I don't think I'm that irreplaceable or brilliant, that certain things were not able to be articulated. So I want to circle around back to clarify these points that were just sort of left dangling. And I'm sorry I couldn't be at last meeting. Whatever, stuff happens. So when I had said that 50% a goal, an arbitrary goal to have 50% of Brisbane's workforce working in Brisbane, that meant 50% of Brisbane residents, not 50% of Brisbane's workforce, which is 8,000 living in Brisbane. Clearly that does not work, right? What I had said was that 50% of Brisbane's working population should also have or residential population should also, would be nice if they could also find jobs here. And so that would be 4,443 residents, and assume 50% of those are in employment, because not everybody chooses to work, and some people are too young, and some people are too old. So maybe we have 2,000 people employable here, which means that we would want to accommodate as a goal just 1,000 people, both living and working in Brisbane, which is substantially different than how it came across in the preceding meeting. I mean, I think it got interpreted as to be like 8,000 people living and working here. So I'm really not that crazy, guys. It was a stretch goal, but it was not insanity. Yeah, so, and I don't know, maybe we've already achieved that goal. Maybe we haven't. That's data that I was not able to put together from with my own resources. And of course, there's a whole other question about how we would achieve that, but it was something that I thought was important given the transportation and all of those other issues and how all the other issues combine into each other. And then, so emissions are generally calculated on a per capita basis, and housing, so even though we section out emissions on a per capita basis because we need to have a uniform standard that applies across all things, otherwise you're trying to divide apples by oranges. Housing size greatly influences your carbon footprint, basically. It does have a large effect on it. And there are a number of ways we can estimate a sustainable carbon footprint, and even more ways to translate that into the footprint of an impact of a home. However, we can say with fair certainty that 3,000 square foot per person cannot be managed in a sustainable way. And I don't want to get into arguing about the minutiae of this, because, like I said, there are just so many variables between us and that number that it would just, we could have a whole year-long conference on it, and that's not useful. But the Bay Area as a whole is faced with housing shortage. New housings contain embodied energy when you construct them. How do we increase our housing stock without building new homes on the baylands, without destroying more habitat, without cutting down more trees? And it seemed to me that the most rational way to increase our housing stock without increasing the development footprint, while also decreasing our per capita carbon footprint, is to house more people within the existing housing stock. Just as an aside, because this came up, San Francisco does have a minimum size for a residential unit, and I believe it's about 300 square feet. While I would not propose we start chopping every house in Brisbane in half, I think it would be desirable to add some sort of lottery that McMansions built prior to a certain date could choose to enter. And it would have to have a cutoff date because you wouldn't want people building a McMansion with the expectation that they're going to circumvent the zoning stuff. Exactly, that's what I was going to say. But that is one, it makes sense in a lot of ways. If there are McMansions that are not being fully utilized, that they could potentially enter a lottery, and that it could help to address many of these other issues. And that is something that we put forward as a suggestion. That is something that would fall under the council and planning commission's purview. They would have to make the decision on it and figure out how it would work out. But that was one idea that was discussed. And I think the way it was put forward at the previous meeting was very confusing. So I wanted to go ahead and clarify that.
Have you taken into account what the increased number of vehicles associated with that would be?
That would have to be accounted for, I think, at the planning level and the lottery level. I'm not a planning commissioner. I don't know all of the in and outs of zoning, so I did not feel personally qualified to reach the final conclusion of how this should work, but I felt it was a good idea to put out there and have intelligent citizens
Ask those questions. Yeah.
And have the planning commission work through the details if the council felt that it was in fact a desirable route to go down. Any other questions about that? So with regards to the green business thing, when we discussed it in subcommittee, green business certification, the consensus at that time was that it did not seem like a very attractive use of money. However, if the committee at large feels differently, we can keep that in the plan and we can see if the city has the stomach for the money. It was an annual expense. If it was a one-time expense, I'd say go for it. But unfortunately, it's an annual expense. And Karen, I believe, talked to them about possibly prorating it for our smaller city. But no, it seems like it's a flat rate. No matter size the city, you have to. Isn't that what you told me, Karen?
Natalie talked.
Oh, was it Natalie? I thought it was Karen.
It was per capita, but our rate for this was like $1,000.
Okay, it was per capita.
And it's not
Okay.
It's not a robust program at the county level now, but it maybe it's kind of a chicken-egg debate.
Yeah.
You need to get involved to get it up and going, but that's something for all of your input. We were kind of in the middle on that. I don't think the subcommittee felt strongly.
Okay. I thought we sort of half poo-pooed it. I don't know that it was a particularly definitive answer. I think we just kind of felt there was potentially better things we could do with the money. But like I said, it's open for discussion. It's fully open for discussion. And considering some of the other things we've come up against, I'm considering reevaluating that use of money. I don't know. I think we should add an aspirational goal of partnering with some biodiesel production. I believe there used to be a station on Bayshore, whether or not there is or is not. But if we are looking at converting large number of vehicles to biodiesel, you kind of have to look at, cradle to cradle, So that was another thought in there.
I think Glenn brought up some really, correct me if I'm wrong, but brought up some very negative aspects of certain biodiesel fuels come from. So
yes.
We would need to be very circumspect in.
That would be part of the purpose of trying to partner with someone, is because there are some very, very desirable sources for biodiesel, and there are some not so desirable.
There are some that are
sources for
extremely
biodiesel.
destructive.
So, and there's some very destructive sources. So if the city got involved in a partnership, and I don't know if that could be simple as waiving business license fees, or courting somebody through the Chamber of Commerce or something, you know. But I think if we're going to invest in those vehicles, we have to invest in the technology.
I agree.
Yeah.
I do believe the environmental purchasing policy does include things like 100% PCC paper. I didn't write down what made me think that we needed to clarify that, but there was something in the discussion about the environmental purchasing policy.
I don't think we knew the answer at the time, but
Yeah. Well, the counties is based on the federal, and they both do have requirements for PCC content. I can tell you that because I've read over them. And I think the thought is to have the city of Brisbane adopt something based on the counties, because then we don't have to do all of quite so much legwork.
do you want to update on that, Natalie? We have a little update.
Okay, please go ahead.
One of our interns is helping us with the purchasing policy, and she's doing some research on that. Yes, the draft for the climate action plan. So she's been in touch with San Mateo County, and even though they're working on updating their plan, she was able to get a draft that we haven't had time to review yet, but we will very soon.
Can you send me a copy of that, if you please? Is that possible?
I'll check.
Okay, great.
I think we'll see if the whole committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, if you could share with the whole committee.
We were lucky that the city manager department was getting an intern and had an opening for her to do some projects, so we threw that out there, and
that's-
she's giving us something. It's not going to be a final document. It'll get looked at by
Wonderful.
you guys.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you. And then another thing that came up that was confusing, I thought, was gas-powered lawn equipment. We had put forth in the subcommittee to ban gas-powered lawn equipment. And the thought process there was that it is banned on the Baylands in the DEIR, and it seems like if it's good enough for the Baylands, it should be good enough for the city of Brisbane, I would think.
We have asked the consultant, we haven't got the information back yet, though, what the CO2 emission reduction would be from that measure, so.
Probably pretty small, I would guess. But it seems, I don't know, keeping it uniform, you know, holding ourselves to the same standards that we hold the Baylands. I think there's a certain amount of credibility to be had there, even if the CO2 reduction is not that substantial.
Yeah, I think staff just mentioned the concern that we kind of talked about how many people we thought already had gas-powered equipment that would have to get rid of it, but there might be, I don't know if it would be possible to manage and enforce, but maybe you could grandfather equipment so that if you have a gas-powered weed eater and it dies, then you need to buy an electric one the next time. But
Yeah,
how do you
give it 5
how do you
years.
prove that?
Prove that.
Give it 5 years, and people's equipment will age out. They'll know not to buy one, a gas one.
Maybe.
There are many ways to approach it.
Yeah, and maybe one of the other ways to approach is to phase it in with first, businesses and then
Sure.
residential. So that, great swaths of unhappy lawn in Crocker Industrial Park and out at the marina, they will not use, gas-powered equipment for that.
Yeah, that's an interesting.
Because for them,
Yeah.
they invest in new equipment probably much more frequently because of the volume of maintenance that they do, and also the volume that they do has a greater impact than, Joe Blow weeding his back 40 so that he doesn't get a note from the fire marshal.
Well, I think another, related possibility would be to have contractors do it. So if it's a privately owned, residence or whatever, and the person has a gas-powered equipment, we're not going to force them to change it. But if you have a business license to be a landscaper, then that could be potentially a requirement. And,
Right.
and since
Yeah.
most of the commercial properties use landscaping services, you'd be getting an additional benefit of the residences that hire contractors would also fall under that.
That would be peachy with me.
Yeah, much easier to regulate.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are all good ideas.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, committee members. I just felt we should be holding ourselves to the same standard that we're holding others. Sort of, I have some of these naive impulses here. A little bit of childhood idealism. So the sewage treatment plant, I don't think we ever thought that was something that Brisbane was going to go alone, that we were just going to run out and build one. But last I heard, San Francisco is operating at or near full capacity in its plants, and since we're supposed to add how many thousands of residents to the Bay Area, according to not BBK, but the RENA, right? I'm afraid all of those people poop.
Really?
Yes.
Can we get some non-pooping people?
Watch your language, please. There's children watching.
And unfortunately, eventually there's going to need to be a sewer plant built somewhere. And I know a lot of people will not like to have it in our backyard. However, if we're converting all of these vehicles to natural gas powered, if we're going to with a natural gas powered fleet, that natural gas has to come from somewhere, unless you want to frack it.
I was worried you were going to.
It's, methane capture, because right now the sewer plants, it's just allowed to escape up into the air.
Yes, I know. I drive by one every day.
Yes. And unfortunately, we all know here that methane is 20 to 80 times more potent in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide. Mm-hmm. So the fact that we are generating methane, we are not using it, we are instead extracting other sources out of the ground with highly toxic methods, makes me feel that the responsible thing to do is take care of our own gas. So this would be something that Brisbane would not go alone. It would be something that would be done in partnership with a municipality, another, it would be done long term. It's not like I'm going to go out there and with a shovel and fork and start excavating for the sewage plant today. This is sort of on the horizon, the fringement that we have to think about if we are going to have a positive relationship with this planet and not just dump the stuff untreated into the ocean.
It's a interesting thought because certainly with all the construction happening around Coyote Point, as well as the fact that we have ecology, within our city limits, we certainly could potentially partner with them. I know that South San Francisco Scavenger just got their methane digester. I don't know what the status of ecology is, but maybe there might be an opportunity to partner with them, possibly as a way of inducing them, or as part of negotiations for their expansion plans or something like that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the methane production from the ADs, South San Francisco Scavenger thinks it's going to be able to supply only most of its fleet, not 100%, so they're going to have a deficit starting off there. I think Ecology thinks that once they're up and running, they're going to be able to supply 100% of their fleet and have some to spare, but still, that's not, the demand for natural gas is outstripping the supply by quite a bit, so let's not waste what we have.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. So that was a fringe thing, but I felt like, again, it didn't really I felt like it needed clarification, where it was coming from and where it was going to, and that it was not like something on the immediate agenda.
Although it could be.
could be. It could come sooner than I think. I'm thinking 20 years out, this might happen. San Francisco will finally get around to dealing with its problems. But maybe it'll be sooner than that.
Yeah, at the staff level, we hadn't heard that they have a shortage and they are making plans to expand, but I don't think we intended to take it off of the future things to study.
Yeah, no, I wanted the committee to understand where it was coming from and the limited scope that we had envisioned for this particular. It's not a Brisbane-led project. And then edible gardens have a huge, huge impact on climate change. What percentage of, I used to know this off the top of my head, and I'm sorry I'm brain dead at the moment. 70% of California water goes to agriculture, I believe.
I think it's 80%.
80%, yeah. And commercial agriculture requires about 10 times as much water as urban farming for the same yields. And if you guys want me to go into the detailed reasons for that, I can. But 15% of the state's electricity goes to water pumping. And there's also food miles to consider and everything. I know somebody who's been on a waiting list for a spot in the community garden, she says, for 3 years.
Wow.
So, Yeah, not long at all. Took you 10 years. So,
It shows up a need that we need more community garden space, I think.
we do. So, and given that, so even though it'll increase our water consumption locally, potentially, it will decrease the state's water footprint radically, right? So I'm sorry I didn't make more detailed notes about why that came up, but it was something that I, for some reason, felt needed to be expanded upon. And I think a 20% water reduction is a wonderful and lofty goal. We won't reach that, just, off the gate. But any true sustainability plan needs to make sure that we are not being penny wise, pound foolish, or robbing Peter to pay Paul. So a phased conservation plan would help us make sure that we are eliminating waste without harming our habitat. And I think this just came up because some people felt they needed to water trees, which I totally agree with.
Oh, yeah.
We are having a problem in our yard because we did the right thing and diverted our drainage out to the street. And the downspouts used to just dump onto the property. And we have been losing trees in our yard.
Yeah.
And some old shrubs, which I had never watered them in 7 years. And we, like I said, we did what we were required to under city code and divert that water out to the street where it goes, picks up some nice amount of pollution and goes into the bay, rather than filtering through our soil, and now we've got a problem.
Code may need to be looked at, actually.
Yeah, and it's a completely different situation in a drought than it is in a high rainfall, because drainage law makes the uphill property responsible for any
downhill property.
Problems and concentrated flow out of a downspout can cause
I know.
slides.
So, but we need to I think that we need to look at this, how it's implemented. Maybe there needs to be diverters, or leach blinds put in so that the water's not all coming down in one spot, but it comes out in a 10, 20-foot long pipe. And it's not mentioned the ground, or there needs to be a switch so you can, on rainy days, turn the valve and it goes to the street, and on mild days, let it go to the leach line.
I'm surprised nobody has brought up the type of gray water systems. San Francisco has approved guidance for diverting your gray water out to plants, to planted areas, and I'm not sure what happens in heavy rainfall years. I guess you probably have a valve that you can turn that off, but that's an option I haven't heard the committee
Currently,
bring
we're
up. that we
using
could-
5-gallon buckets.
That's what I'm using.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly it's going to cost more to pipe a system, but
It's not that bad, especially when you do live on a hill. I mean,
Yeah.
you got the gravity.
yeah, and we should add that to the plan.
Yeah. I thought it came up at least once.
Yeah.
Well,
Whatever.
now.
We have one,
Yeah.
or had one. We don't anymore.
Let's add it in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Most people are just doing it, or a lot of people are just doing it.
Manually, yeah.
Yeah.
Get muscle.
Oh, God, you want to feel my muscle from lifting a bucket of water every day?
So,
Now it's getting some work. 'cause
we
it's
gave up
hurt.
on ours because I don't water ornamentals, and you can't put gray water on edibles, basically. So, but
Why can't you put gray water in edibles?
it's not recommended because of the potential bacterial load. I don't know how big of a problem it really is. I don't have the science, but it sounds a little more. It sounds a little bit like a scare to me. But
It's not.
there you go. You're not supposed to, according to the
I
prescribed.
used gray water to water a whole yard down
Yeah.
south when I was a kid, and it never had any problems.
Yeah.
Well,
And we didn't have to water.
I don't consider the water I collect when I'm waiting for the water to get hot to be gray
No,
water.
that's
No,
not gray
it's not
water.
gray
that's
water.
potable.
No, that's fresh.
Yeah.
That's the
Tell the
water I
cats
use.
drink out of it.
Bugs landed.
Well, that's not going to hurt your plants either.
So that is the sum total of my comments based on watching last meeting's video. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask me or say anything, respond to anything I said, or do we want to go over this document at all?
Yeah, if we want to go over that.
Okay.
I just want to take a moment,
this?
Barbara, to thank you, because those are some really great comments and really, added to the conversation. And it's too bad you weren't here last time, but I really appreciate you taking such diligent notes and bringing them to us this month. So thank you.
Yeah, I needed to take better notes because I needed to figure out why I said what I said,
Yeah.
but it was there. The answers were at least there, if not the questions. It's like Jeopardy.
Yeah. Awesome.
Guess the question.
Just one staff comment I wanted to throw out on the housing size issue. San Francisco has a minimum, but I understand we don't have a
Yeah.
minimum in Brisbane.
Well, we might want to do that if we do this. If this idea goes forward through council and planning, then I would think we would need one.
Yeah, and then I don't know, Michelle mentioned vehicles, and I don't know if you were referring to parking, but if anybody has thoughts about that impact on the parking load and how sensitive of an issue that is, and you guys would have more to say about it living here, but does that kind of make anybody else on the committee want to temper this thought, or?
Well, when I brought up about the cars, it's because the whole idea of having an increase in population density within the existing structures usually includes additional cars, which includes additional greenhouse gases. That's different from new infill housing, of which I think is just getting extremely intense. And I think that's also an issue. So, but on the other hand, the council's looking at, 4 and 5 story corridors right along here of multi-use buildings. So, that's going to be horrible. South City has already planned 120-foot high building corridors along their transportation corridors. It's just going to be like walls and walls of urban buildings in South San Francisco. And if we're not careful, Brisbane will be pushed to follow suit. And is that what we really want?
No, I don't think so. I think this would at
Except
least
that's what's happening right now.
Yeah.
I think by focusing our development in high-density strategies along transportation corridors is ultimately preferable to either expanding outwards into undeveloped areas or saying we're not going to contribute to the growth of the Bay Area. People are coming and being a NIMBY isn't solving the problem either. So we have to find, I think, some middle ground in high-density transportation-focused housing. In my mind, is if there's a better solution, like
I'd
telling,
love to hear a better
yeah.
solution, but we're uniquely aspected where that high-density housing has a huge impact on the mountain.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's no getting
You know?
around that.
So it's a real razor's edge that we're
Clean up the baylands, put them there.
Yeah, clean up the baylands to the point where it really is clean and not just concreted over and you can't live on the ground, you have to live one floor up.
Yeah.
Big difference in what we consider clean enough for housing and what state law considers clean enough for housing.
Yeah. The science just, I don't think, has kept up with, the science and the regulatory environment has not kept up with the science, is basically what
Not at all.
so, I felt that this was like the lesser of many evils.
So the parking isn't a hang-up for...
Oh, I mean, it could be, they'll have to,
the whole thing.
you know, if they win the lot, if their house is selected for the lottery, then you can require them to add parking.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking along the same lines of, like, you're only eligible if you have not only the available house space, but the available parking space.
Well, and that happens now, but people get additional cars beyond the number of spaces that are required. That's kind of...
Yeah.
Well, you know, I know it's kind of heresy, but I think we should be limiting the size of the single-family dwellings, the infill single-family dwellings. A 5,000 square foot house is not really very sustainable
No, it's not.
unless you have 10 people in there, really. So, it depends where you're at.
Yeah.
Yeah. How much space do you need?
Okay, and then the rest of these, everybody thinks they should be included in the plan. We're good with...
There's an odd thing I want to throw out there that someone mentioned to me quite a few years ago, more than a decade ago, that Brisbane might want to consider building a parking garage for its residents to park their extra vehicles, and then perhaps even have electric go-karts or different form of transportation to get around town, like many, country club type communities do.
Or bikes in different locations.
They'd have to be electric bikes because the hill is going to kick most people's butt.
Yeah. I was reading,
Yeah, can you imagine?
it was like Philadelphia or something has some totally random city has the highest bike adoption rate in the U.S., and they haven't done anything to promote it. They hardly have any bike lanes. They haven't done diddly squat. But if you look at it, it's flat.
Yeah.
Which we are not. So, yeah.
Well, I think it's a great idea, Michael.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Little electric carts or something.
Something kind of at the entrance to town, and then, people don't have to drive up. Yeah, that's
There's a
great.
few places it could go, but I'm not going to mention them.
Good for you.
That's never been brought up before. No, I don't know if it pencils out in terms of buying land and building a structure, but
Or even asking for usage, because people like their stuff where they like their stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
True.
Or maybe create some kind of economic incentive through taxes or something.
Well, I don't think it'll fly unless we have. We're kind of going off on a tangent here, but I don't think it'll fly unless we start ticketing for parking on the street, like for street sweeping or something, because people will take advantage of that free parking space on the street unless it's not free, and then they'll figure out what to do with their car. But
we've had a couple of citizen committees look at that.
Yeah,
a
we've
couple
got
of times
parking
I've
wars
been
on every street in
both of
Brisbane.
them.
yeah,
I've served on both
Yeah.
of those committees, and they've, we actually put together an ordinance for a pilot parking permit program. So we have an ordinance on the books, and we did a survey, and this was the Traffic Advisory Committee before the Complete Street Safety Committee. We did a survey. I think we got like 300 or so responses, and some of the people lived on the ridge and didn't have a parking issue, and they said, we want nothing. About 25% said, oh yeah, we want a program, and we found kind of a block of a street that could be a pilot. But a number of people said, we don't want government doing that, we want nothing to do with it, leave us alone. We took it to council, and they were not interested in doing that type of
Yeah.
I remember that.
regulating the number of cars that you can park on the street.
Yeah. I have been a proponent of it for a long time, but it's a ways off from flying.
But
That's
currently,
personal, not as an environmentalist. Sorry, go ahead.
currently a lot of people are parking on the sidewalks, and that's really not the place where they should be parking. There are just so many like old cars that people don't drive, just dumped along the streets. So there's just so much that can be done actually in town about these issues.
So the new version of what used to be the Traffic Advisory Committee is the Complete Street Safety Committee, and they worked for last year at length on pedestrian routes, and we prioritized pedestrian routes in central Brisbane and to the schools. It was kind of a school plan to start with, and that was the first complaint is my kids can't walk to school, I can't walk my kids to school. So we've got a plan in place. We put a grant application together to do a lot of improvement. It's all on the website, and we can send you guys a direct link if you want. The police are starting to do enforcement on those routes of people that block the sidewalk, either in their driveway or parking where they shouldn't be, and that pedestrian path is kind of a stroller width, 3 feet minimum, so people are actually getting tickets at this point. That's my understanding, and it isn't every sidewalk that exists in town. We're kind of trying to take it piece by piece, but there's definitely some movement on that, so.
There's a lot of fight about it, too, because I know the city owns the first 10 feet or so of everybody's property anyway. And if they chose to build parking and bike lanes and sidewalks, they could. But you're going to lose 10 feet of your property that you think is your property, even though it's not. It's
Yeah, but let's clarify that. On the lower streets that are not a straight alignment but a curve, I think the road improvement is centered in the right-of-way, but the upper streets, the road meanders in the right-of-way, so if you're on an upper street, you don't necessarily have your 10 feet.
Mine was like 8 feet or 10 feet. It was
Yeah,
a
but
lot.
that may not be typical.
Yeah.
On the other side, that house is in the right-of-way
Yeah,
on an upper street. I just wanted to clarify that if anybody's...
difficult.
So, can we move on at this point? We're good with that. We wanted to talk a little bit about some things we discussed at the last subcommittee meeting, and where we're going with this plan is we're hoping to incorporate the comments that we got at the last meeting. We've started to, and these comments, and bring to you at the next meeting a draft plan that's ready for you to recommend to council. So that would be the complete document. So we're hoping to be able to send that to you in early August, and you can review it, and then when we meet in late August, we can hone it and have a recommendation. A couple of things have come up in working with the consultant that was helping us calculate greenhouse gas emissions. So the measures that we put in, and obviously there are a couple more here that might add to our savings. We were looking at around a 2,800 metric tons reduction in CO2 equivalent emissions, and accounting for growth, and per the AB 32 climate reduction bill, we're required to bring our levels to 1990 levels by the year 2020, and that's the accepted standard is 15% below, 2005? 15% below 2005 levels. So with growth, that was a 7,400, 7,600, so we were about a third of the way there, and we were very concerned about that because our measures, we'd come up with a lot of measures, and there wasn't a ton of room to go get more. So we had started to incorporate some sustainable street measures, such as what we just talked about, and the consultant gave us kind of a renewed look at adding transportation to our plan, which we were calling an environmental action plan. If we unlock this slide, if we're calling it if we include transportation, we would go back to calling it a climate action plan. So there are a couple of state measures, actually 3, that would give us some reduction credits.
So I think that the interesting part of what's happened here is that we thought we didn't want to do a climate action plan because once we included the stuff from 101, we thought that was going to sink us. And that was really bad. It turns out that, at least according to the consultant, most of the, so we were just going to ignore the whole transportation sector, basically. It turns out, after dealing with the consultant, that the biggest chunk of savings we can get is stuff that has come down from the state and applies to the transportation sector. So in looking at it as a numbers game, when it initially seemed like having the including the transportation was like the bad idea, now it looks like maybe it's the right idea. So carry on, please, Karen.
Thank you. So there are 3 bills, the Pavley bill, and I'm not the most familiar with these, but that's why we have kind of a consultant being our expert.
Mm-hmm.
Is required to achieve the maximum feasible and cost-effective reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from motor vehicles. It was amended in 2009 and applies through from 2009 to 2016. These tables show us how many greenhouse gas emissions would be avoided by these numbers. The second one is low carbon fuel standard, which mandates a 10% overall reduction in the carbon intensity of transportation fuels. And the third one isn't transportation related. It's the California 33% renewable portfolio standard. So I want to go to the last table. These transportation measures, the way they're calculated, I guess there are 2 methods, and one is any transportation that's happening within your city limits, so that includes through traffic. And the consultant recommends, and the federal guidelines are not to use that method, but to use in destination and origin and destination trips only. So on the last page, that's the pink column. So if we include transportation, obviously we need more greenhouse gas reductions, but those 3 state policies get us to within 1,000 metric tons of CO2. So then with the measures that we've come up with that are 2,800, we're in really good shape for 2020. And staff likes that, and I think the subcommittee is okay with it too, because Governor Brown also instituted in 2030 that we get up to 40% reductions.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, we were almost losing sleep about how are we going to get to this 2020 goal with the plan that we had started with. So we're actually kind of relieved. We still feel as strongly as we feel about the measures and everything we're going to do to implement them and get people to lower energy in their homes and their businesses, and the solid waste measures and the water measures. But we've got this to kind of keep us legally in bounds and make part of our plan. So we're interested in questions and feedback on that.
I just wanted to ask, I know other cities have already developed the environmental action plan, so have we leveraged other examples and how others are achieving these goals? And are others able to achieve these goals, some of the ones that already have environmental action plan in place?
Oh, and specifically environmental action plans? I don't think in the county, I'm not sure if anyone just did an environmental action plan and not a climate action plan. We were kind of the outliers in wanting to do that originally.
But I believe there are some counties in Marin and other areas that already have them in place. Is that correct? Or at least
As an environmental action plan?
Well,
Or
either
climate.
one. Did we have has anybody achieved it in either kind of plan, climate or environmental?
I would say I think that everyone that's adopted probably has calculations that show they achieved their goals. But what I'm saying is I think they are including transportation largely.
So I read, I think, Berkeley's, and I think, I forget whether it was Sonoma or Marin's, it was a while ago now. And they had a lot of, in those plans, they had a lot of goals and a lot of projected data. However, we have not seen that data be collaborated. In fact, I don't think the numbers have come back in. So I think this is all kind of still pie in the sky.
Well, yeah, the numbers aren't immediately available, and I think we talk about the RICAPS working group through CCAG has been really helpful in getting agencies to provide data, and they're doing the emissions inventories. So we were just working on the inventory for 2010 a year ago, but they're talking about doing the 2015 one very soon, and that makes a lot of sense. We shouldn't be waiting 3 or 4 or 5 years to do the inventory. So, yeah, I don't think that everything is projected until you do an inventory, and there are still some assumptions that have to be made, because you can't measure greenhouse gas emissions. You can't weigh it. You've got to make, but they're pretty good. We have the assumptions table, and we can go on to that. I think it was great to have the consultants to help us, or still having them help us do the calculations. It's pretty number intensive, but I was pretty impressed with what they're doing to come up with these numbers.
Yeah, I guess the point is we don't actually know if it works or not, because, even the Berkeley plan projects 20% of the housing stock will be improved by such and such a level. We just don't know if their programs are actually achieving that level of participation or not, but this is the way these plans are done, for better or for worse. And yeah, so that's it.
That's very true to comment, and I think we could, just brings up a thought that we could put that into the document of our plan, that we want to look back on numbers afterwards, and I think that's what the inventories actually do. But it was when they asked us to collect data, which was our role in how they calculated these inventories, they asked for previous data to use to project going forward. So they didn't just pull something out of a hat that said, we think you'll achieve 20% here. They looked at what had happened in terms of housing, in terms of building permits, in terms of energy upgrades, to make projections that were reasonable. And we can talk about some of the assumptions if we think we're ready to go to those slides. If that's part of what we're.
Are we still open to more ideas for our?
Absolutely.
I think we should just put a couple things in there that are outside the box, and one of them is a complete, full-on effort and plan to solarize Crocker Industrial Park, the entire Crocker Industrial Park.
Yeah, that's going to be extremely difficult because of the absentee landlords. However, I fully and heartily agree with you putting that on paper and then seeing how far we can push it.
Yeah, and just because they're absentee landlords, it doesn't mean they're not interested in monetary assets regarding their properties. And if we put together a coalition that would actually go out and take the responsibility of solarizing the entire industrial park and putting it all on a grid that taps into, PG&E's, power grid, which runs right through Crocker Industrial Park. It's like, why don't we just put it out there and see what happens and support it with some bucks, and organization.
So we did talk at length about not even just absentee landlords, but if a tenant is the one that's using the energy and the owner is the one that's responsible for upgrading a building, we talked at length about how to get interest in that, and some of the things are trying to get the county to take the lead on requiring disclosure. So when somebody rents or buys a piece of property, they know what the energy usage is and what that cost impact is on their either rent or loan costs.
I'm thinking a little bit more, a little differently than that. And that's like setting up an energy company and not necessarily that the energy has to be used by the buildings that are the businesses that are there. I'm talking about setting up an entire grid of solar array across all of the roofs of Crocker Industrial Park that feeds into one big, solar bank that is operated by a, profit or not-for-profit company.
Well, if we get a CCA going, many of our dreams will come true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, why don't we just put it out there? I'm not talking about, you got to solarize your building and use your energy. I'm talking about a whole connected array across the top of all of those roofs of Crocker Industrial Park.
PG&E doesn't pay.
Well, I think that's a great idea. I was very disturbed yesterday to hear about a bill that's winding its way. I think it just got introduced into committee in this session, but it exempts power companies, PG&E, Southern Edison, from having to connect more than 5% of their power load to power generated on rooftops or whatever. So once they hit their 5% limit, they can choose not to interconnect a resident or a business that wants to put solar on. So
That's not right.
yeah, it's a travesty.
Criminal.
It's absolutely a travesty, but unfortunately at this point Sacramento, now that it's under one-party control, has been completely bought by the lobbyists. So as we've seen with some other issues, they're buying their way out of having to interconnect people. I don't really know many more details about this. There's a big solar thing happening at Moscone this week, and I was having dinner with somebody who was attending. So yeah, if anybody knows about this, it basically allows PG&E to say, if you put solar on, we don't have to connect you.
Nice.
So.
Well, it seems like that's an opportunity for us to all connect without that.
Well, I think that's where we need a CC.
Even if you put as much solar as you possibly can on your roof, you still can't get away from PG&E. There's not enough roof space on 90% of the homes in Brisbane to generate enough power to function throughout the day for most people who are going to use enough power to want to go solar, myself included. I've been looking into this for the last 2 months.
I think I disagree with that, but...
Well, I mean, but the other issue is, if you don't have the opportunity for net metering, one of the major financial incentives for going solar has been removed, and so it's a travesty.
And see, forming a whole solar array on Crocker Industrial Park could help supply energy to those homes that cannot.
Yes.
Because almost the entire industrial park is basically in the sun most of the day.
Yes. And so we need a CCA.
You have to cover
we need
the
municipal
structures as well.
Yeah. I agree. Cover the parking structures.
It would have to be a huge solar array.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about the size of the Baylands. I mean, you want to talk about generating some money for the Baylands, cover it in solar.
Yeah, maybe taking a step beyond CCA and actually looking at a municipal power, municipal power company.
So 2 comments. One is that the plan that we're trying to adopt is always going to be a working document, so no, you shouldn't see this as a time limit to come up with ideas.
No,
This will be what we'll adopt now, and there's always more. If we talk about recommending something on August 26th, and then the council adopts it, and 3 months later you have some other idea, it's a continuing living working document. And so the CCA, as I understand, the feasibility study is underway. I don't know how, they definitely were asking about opportunities to have renewable energy within the county.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't prohibit them from the county from that itself, from putting one in place, but I think if there is an opportunity, it could work in very well.
Yeah.
We were going to update on the CCA later on in staff updates. But we can definitely put it in this category of things that should be studied further.
Yeah. Wonderful. Any other comments on the environmental action plan? Climate action plan?
I did have one more thing here, and I keep pushing for this because on table 1, EC1 and EC2, the first one is construction over 10,000 square feet. Is that because that's the way the ordinance is written, and can we? So that's the way the ordinance is written, I'm assuming. But 10,000 square feet seems really large to me. Can we put something in that says move to 5,000 square feet by 2025 or 2030 or something to lower that threshold?
The whole community background and move to the next set of slides. This was something that the consultant provided us to kind of give us background on what assumptions were used to come up with the greenhouse gas emission reductions. So we're talking about the first column, and this seems to be what the Green Building Ordinance Committee came up with.
Yeah.
I understood when working on our best practices and passing them on to the county that we had negotiated more stringent agreements in some development agreements, but could we lower this? Sure, we can propose that in our plan. Yeah.
How about eliminate the square footage altogether?
Yeah. Sure. I'd be happy with that. I don't know if it would fly with everyone else, but I think everybody should be required, but that's not personal.
Yeah, we had that discussion on the Green Building Ordinance Subcommittee, and certainly the members of OSAC were very enthusiastic about that, but the other members of the subcommittee weren't. But it actually brings up another thought, which is with Title 24, or is it Title 24?
Right.
Having been changed, we're actually, our Green Building Ordinance, well, it's current state law requires more than our Green Building Ordinance.
In most areas, almost.
Almost every, I think in every area. Karen, you were on the committee too, right?
I attended towards the end. I don't know about all the work you did, but there's Title 24 and there's LEED Silver, and those, it was difficult to have a matrix that compared one to the other. And LEED Silver is, the way the LEED program works is you can kind of pick and choose which items which give you points towards achieving a level. So Title 24 could be prescriptive or could be selective. So it isn't apples for apples. Like in this measure you would have to have renewable, in this measure you would have to have more renewable. But overall.
Right, no, but I mean, and correct me if and Glenn isn't here to corroborate my probably faulty memory, but if I remember correctly, the way that we left the Green Building Ordinance was, wow, Title 24 has now exceeded everything we were even talking about, and which was being opposed by the contractors and the Chamber of Commerce, and everybody was like, oh, no, you can't do that. And then the state came in and put in standards that supersede our current Green Building Ordinance, so we put the entire Green Building Ordinance aside for the time being because current state law is more stringent than anything we were even discussing.
Right.
So that's, right now we don't even have a Green Building Ordinance.
We didn't take it as far as, it's the planning staff took the lead on this subcommittee, but they didn't take it as far as to recommend to council to repeal what we have. So as of now, if there's an application, they're reviewed for both.
Right, but we have, but we're not looking at. I think. Well, yeah. So we're not going to come back to the Green Building Ordinance until we have more data about what effect Title 24 has had.
But this, in just simple terms, the state really caught up and moved ahead. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I guess the pertinent question is: this 10,000 square feet, is that come from the Green Building Ordinance or Title 24?
Green Building Ordinance.
The Green Building Ordinance. What does Title 24 say?
No, there's no space. There's no limit. Or there's no minimum size.
It was any additional remodel.
Any additional remodel, any construction.
So maybe this should be rewritten for the consultant because that might change the way the consultant calculates this?
I think it should be rewritten, and I think it should be at the minimum the state standards, and I think it should be higher.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that we should replace Commercial Green Building Ordinance with State Title 24 because that's more stringent, but...
Yeah.
And then I think the same comment could potentially apply to EC2.
Yes, absolutely.
And, you know...
Well, he was saying most of them, right? Didn't you say most of them were?
Everything, yeah. So Title 24 has exceeded Brisbane in both commercial and residential new construction as well as,
Yeah, because like, you build a 5,000 square foot home, I'm sorry, that should be like,
Yeah.
oh God, it is so hot.
Yes.
holy.
I should take my sweater off. I
Next level.
Thank you, Karen.
thought maybe it was just me.
Microclimate.
All right.
You know, I mean, the homes that some of the new homes that they're building, they should absolutely be subject to, you know, the most stringent green building ordinance, Title 24 or whatever that there is. If you're building a 5,000 square foot home, come on, really?
Okay.
You can do that. And really, it should just be any new construction.
Yeah.
I mean, why are we screwing around with this? The planet's going to be dead in 30 years if we don't do something.
Oh, probably, don't exaggerate, Michelle, 70?
Okay, 70s.
Let's be clear, the planet won't be dead, it'll be humans that'll be hurting.
The biosphere.
The planet's going to be fine. In fact, it'll be getting even better once we're gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we'll probably take most of the biosphere with us.
It's okay. The comets and other things have taken most of the biosphere before, and it all came back.
They came, okay.
Without us.
So,
So basically, we're
Yeah,
going to replace all of this
Yeah.
with Title 24? Or do we want to read Title 24?
Yeah, I mean, I
Or
think
what?
that, you know, in terms of EC1 and EC2, we would want to look at it because that might actually improve the savings based on the more stringent standards.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
yeah, and I think those are the only two that apply to
Title 24.
Yeah.
Title 24, which seems weird. It seems like we would do more with that, but I don't know.
How come all these other ones got crossed off?
We weren't qualified. We quantified.
Not quantified, oh.
Quantified.
That's a
Okay.
good question.
I only have one more thing. If nobody else on I would like to hear from anybody else on the committee that has more ideas that they would like to share with the climate action plan.
Now, if you have any others, let's get them because we do have a significant amount of stuff to go, and it's
Yeah.
Okay.
8:18, so.
Okay. So the one thing that drives me, so I know this is a pet project, and for that I'm sorry. But I have went in this with a few personal goals,
Just tell us.
and one was to get parking lots covered with either PV or trees. And I hate this word encourage. I keep trying to get this word changed to required.
Yeah. Change it to required.
We would need to write the corresponding ordinance, but can I formally request that we change that to required? That's EC5.
East, yeah.
Assuming that I have the support of the rest of the committee here.
Wait, that's not EC5, is it? Oh, I see.
The city will encourage the planting of trees in commercial parking lots. And the actual proposal was to either do trees or PV and to make it required.
Yeah, I'm sure we could find some language that gives a time period and all new construction and grandfathers people in and.
Yeah, I mean, if they're updating their, I think we discussed if they're renovating their parking lot, then they need to bring it up, just like if you're renovating a building. And there can be an appeals process if they feel like that's going to cut back on if they're having parking issues, it's going to, there are ways to deal with the fringe cases, but I think we need to have that on the books.
It really
needs to be
it makes a
assertive.
huge difference. It makes a huge difference.
We provide shade for their cars also.
Yeah.
To inquire.
And they have two options there. We're not
Well,
railroading them into just one. Okay, that's all I have.
wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Barbara. Thanks, everyone. Moving on to item 6, discuss opposition to fracking. I'd like to frame this in terms of what the committee is proposing in terms of a letter to the city council. I think we're all in agreement that we oppose fracking, so I'd rather not have a discussion about why we hate fracking, but instead what we intend to do about it within the Open Space and Ecology Committee. Does that sound okay for everybody?
Yep. Lovely.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What does fracking have to do with Brisbane? Where are we fracking?
So I think the intention, if I remember correctly, was that we were going to encourage the city council to write a letter to the state or the county expressing its opposition. It wasn't really trying to shut a project down here in Brisbane. It was more about getting the city to lend its voice to the growing movement against fracking in California.
Well, I was just confused because
Yeah.
I looked into fracking myself, and I was like, any fool who reads the information would be against fracking.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that they've tried to sugarcoat it and call it good for the environment is just crazy.
Yeah.
And it was also proposed that we could possibly ask the city council just to pass a ban for fracking in Brisbane. It would be strictly symbolic.
Okay.
It would just be to join the other municipalities and cities and bodies of land that have banned fracking. It would be up to the council whether or not they felt that was a worthwhile symbolic measure. But, you know, fracking natural gas deposits tend to follow prehistoric bodies of water. So, although it's extremely remote that we would have any deposits here, it is not impossible.
So who wants to write the letter?
Thank you. So do we need a subcommittee, or do we have an individual volunteer that would like to draft a letter for the committee to review and approve?
I could try to draw. I'll go ahead and try to write it up.
Yeah, we've read this stuff recently, and we'll help you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a very good writer, but so as long as y'all understand that. Dyslexia is.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate
Yeah.
that's wonderful.
I'll put something together.
Okay.
All right. So the next item on our agenda is to review the OSAC work plan, which is now being shown on our screen for our reference. And I think the intent here would be to identify